My vision blurred as the chandelier lights danced above the packed banquet hall of the Makati Shangri-La. The applause thundered around me while my mother, Elena, stood at the podium, her emerald dress catching the light as she gestured gracefully toward the audience. The Reyes family has always believed that integrity is our greatest inheritance, she declared, her voice carrying the practiced warmth of someone who had perfected the art of public speaking. For 3 generations, we have built our legacy on transparency, compassion, and unwavering commitment to our community. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The irony would have been laughable if I hadn't felt like my legs were about to give out beneath me. I gripped the edge of our table, my knuckles white against the crisp linen tablecloth, and forced myself to smile as the cameras flashed. This was the annual Manila Business Excellence Awards, where my mother was receiving recognition for her philanthropic work with the Children's Hospital Foundation. The same foundation where she served as board chairwoman, making decisions about medical care and family support that affected hundreds of lives. "Camilla, darling," she had whispered to me earlier while we posed for photos in the hotel lobby, "you look pale. Are you wearing enough makeup? Remember, tonight is about our family's reputation. Smile brighter." I smiled brighter, just like I always did. At 29, I had perfected the art of being Elena Reyes's daughter. Law school at the University of the Philippines had been put on indefinite hold 18 months ago when my health mysteriously began declining, but Mother insisted I still attend every family function. "Education can wait," she'd said. "Family obligations cannot." The fatigue had started gradually. First, I needed afternoon naps that stretched longer each day. Then came the morning nausea that Elena attributed to stress. When my appetite disappeared entirely, she scheduled me appointments with psychiatrists rather than physicians. "Anxiety manifests in many ways, hija," she had explained, booking me sessions with Dr. Martinez, a family friend who specialized in what Mother delicately called emotional wellness. Sofia Alvarez, my best friend since childhood and current law school classmate, had been the only one asking different questions. "When did you last see an actual medical doctor? Not a therapist, not a wellness coach, an actual physician who runs blood tests." I had struggled to remember. Every time I mentioned feeling physically unwell, Mother redirected the conversation toward stress management and positive thinking. She'd started handling all my appointments, claiming it was easier for her schedule since she didn't work. "I have more flexibility to coordinate with doctors," she insisted. "You focus on feeling better." Now, watching her accept accolades for healthcare advocacy, while I fought to stay conscious at our own table, the disconnect felt suffocating. The Filipino social diary photographer approached, and I automatically straightened my posture, preparing for another round of pictures. This was expected. This was normal. The Reyes family never looked anything less than perfect. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elena continued from the podium, "I want to thank my daughter, Camilla, whose strength inspires me every day." The spotlight swung to our table, and I felt hundreds of eyes focus on me. The applause swelled again, but the sound seemed to come from underwater. My breathing grew shallow as the room tilted slightly to the left. "Don't faint," I commanded myself. "Not here, not in front of Manila's social elite with cameras recording every moment." The family's reputation depended on maintaining appearances. Mother had made that clear countless times. Sophia, seated beside me, noticed my grip on the table and quietly slid her water glass closer. "Drink," she whispered, her concern barely concealed behind her practiced social smile. "And breathe slowly." The water helped steady me as Elena finished her speech to thunderous applause. She returned to our table glowing with satisfaction, immediately launching into conversations with the other honorees about upcoming charity galas and foundation events. I excused myself to the restroom, Sophia following closely behind. In the marble-appointed ladies' lounge, I splashed cold water on my face while Sophia stood guard at the door. "This isn't stress, Cam," she said firmly. "Something's wrong. Really wrong. You need to see a doctor tomorrow. Mother says, I don't care what your mother says. Sophia's voice carried the edge she usually reserved for difficult witnesses during our mock trials. Promise me you'll make an appointment, without telling her first. I met her eyes in the mirror, seeing my own reflection looking gaunt despite the careful makeup. When did I get so thin? The elegant black dress that had fit perfectly 6 months ago now hung loose around my shoulders. Even the concealer couldn't hide the dark circles that seemed permanently etched under my eyes. Promise me, Sophia repeated. Against every instinct trained into me about family loyalty and proper channels, I nodded. I promise. We returned to the table just as dessert was being served, and I managed to make it through the rest of the evening by focusing on small, achievable goals. Sit upright, smile when spoken to, clap at appropriate moments, don't collapse until we're home. Elena chatted animatedly during the car ride back to our Makati penthouse, replaying highlights from her speech and planning follow-up meetings with potential donors. I stared out the window at Manila's glittering skyline, wondering why I felt like I was disappearing, while my mother's star continued rising. You were perfect tonight, Iha, she said as our driver pulled into the building's circular driveway. The photographer got some beautiful shots of us together. They'll be perfect for the Foundation's annual report. Perfect. Always perfect. Even when I was falling apart. 3 days later, I sat in the sterile waiting room of St. Luke's Medical Center in Bonifacio Global City, having told Elena I was meeting Sophia for a study group. The deception felt foreign and uncomfortable, but Sophia's insistence had finally overcome my trained obedience. If there's nothing wrong, you'll have peace of mind, she'd reasoned. If there is something, you need to know. Dr. Isabel Cruz appeared younger than I'd expected for someone with such impressive credentials. Her diplomas lined the office wall behind her desk, including oncology certifications from both the Philippines and Johns Hopkins. She listened patiently as I described my symptoms, taking detailed notes and asking follow-up questions that no one had bothered to ask in months. When did these symptoms begin? She inquired, her pen poised over my file. About 18 months ago, it gradually got worse. Have you seen any other physicians during this time? I hesitated. My mother handles most of my medical appointments. She says stress management is more important than running unnecessary tests. Dr. Cruz's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. She excused herself briefly, returning with a thick folder that she placed carefully on her desk without opening it. Miss Reyes, I need to ask you something unusual. Have we met before? The question caught me off guard. I don't think so. This is my first visit to your office. She nodded, but her fingers drummed nervously against the folder's edge. Would you mind if I ran some blood work today? Basic panels to check for common causes of fatigue and weight loss. Of course, that's why I'm here. But as I rolled up my sleeve for the blood draw, Dr. Cruz seemed distracted, occasionally glancing at the unopened folder. The whole interaction felt strange, loaded with subtext I couldn't decipher. The results should be available by tomorrow afternoon, she said as I prepared to leave. But Miss Reyes, may I ask who referred you to me specifically? Sophia looked up oncologists online. She said you had excellent reviews. I paused at the door. Why do you ask? No particular reason. I'll call you as soon as the results are in. That night, at dinner, Elena asked about my day with unusual interest. How was your study group with Sophia? You two have been spending so much time together lately. Fine, I replied, pushing food around my plate. Good. Education is important, but don't let it consume you. Stress can manifest in so many ways. She reached across the table to squeeze my hand. Are you feeling better? You looked so tired at the awards ceremony. A little better, I lied, though the fatigue seemed to be worsening daily. The next afternoon, Dr. Cruz's call came while I was alone in my room. Miss Reyes, could you come in this afternoon? I'd like to discuss your results in person. Something in her tone made my stomach clench. Is everything all right? It would be better if we talked in person. I arrived at her office an hour later to find her looking troubled, the same thick folder from yesterday now open on her desk. She gestured for me to sit, then closed the office door carefully. Miss Reyes, your blood work shows some concerning abnormalities that require immediate follow-up. But before we discuss that, I need to ask you something directly. Taking a deep breath, she said, "Have you been a patient in this hospital system before?" My heart rate spiked. What do you mean? According to our records, you were treated here approximately 2 years ago. Extensive testing was done, including imaging and biopsies. She turned her computer screen toward me, showing a patient file with my name and identification number. These records show a diagnosis that was communicated to your family at that time. The room began spinning. That's impossible. I would remember being here. I would remember having biopsies done. Dr. Cruz's expression grew more troubled. The interesting thing is, according to these files, all communications were directed to your mother, Elena Reyes, who was listed as your healthcare proxy. She received all test results and treatment recommendations. I stared at the screen, recognizing my personal information, but having no memory of any of these appointments or procedures. What diagnosis? She hesitated, then turned the screen away. Ms. Reyes, these records indicate you were diagnosed with early-stage cancer. The recommendations included immediate treatment, but she gestured helplessly at the file. There's no record of you following through with the recommended care. The word cancer hit me like a physical blow. That's impossible. No one ever told me that. My mother would have... I stopped, a terrible possibility beginning to form. What's stranger, Dr. Cruz continued, is that yesterday, after you left, I received a call from someone identifying themselves as Elena Reyes, demanding to know why you were here and requesting that all communication go through her directly. She claimed to be handling your medical affairs due to your emotional instability. The pieces began clicking together with horrible clarity. Elena's insistence on managing all my appointments, her focus on stress and therapy rather than physical examinations, her control over every aspect of my healthcare. The awards ceremony where she spoke passionately about healthcare access while I sat dying at her table. Dr. Cruz, what kind of cancer? She opened the file reluctantly. The records indicate lymphoma, early stage, highly treatable if caught in time. Her voice grew gentler. Ms. Reyes, with proper treatment 2 years ago, your prognosis would have been excellent. But now, she didn't need to finish. I could see it in her face in the way she carefully chose her words. Now, after 2 years without treatment, the situation was far more complicated. I need copies of everything, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Every test, every result, every communication. I'm afraid that's not possible. Dr. Cruz looked genuinely distressed. This morning, I received an official request to transfer all your medical records to another facility. The transfer was authorized by your healthcare proxy. My mother? Yes. The physical files were picked up an hour ago. I sat in stunned silence watching 2 years of my life reorganize themselves around this new, terrible knowledge. Every symptom Elena had dismissed, every medical appointment she had redirected, every time she'd insisted I focus on stress management instead of medical care. It had all been deliberate. Dr. Cruz, do you have any backup copies? Anything at all? She glanced around her office nervously, then leaned forward. Officially, no. But, Ms. Reyes, what's happening to you isn't right. No one should have their medical care controlled without their knowledge, regardless of family dynamics. What are you saying? I'm saying that sometimes ethical doctors keep personal notes, unofficial backups, things that might not be part of the official record transfer. She pulled out a small flash drive from her desk drawer. And sometimes patients deserve to know the truth about their own bodies, regardless of what their families might prefer.
Sophia's apartment in Quezon City had become our unofficial war room. Medical documents, printouts, and legal notepads covered every surface of her dining table as we worked through the night trying to piece together the scope of Elena's deception. The flash drive from Dr. Cruz contained enough evidence to paint a horrifying picture of a systematic medical cover-up. "Look at this," Sophia said, pointing to a series of emails on her laptop screen. "Your mother communicated with Dr. Cruz's office multiple times over the past 2 years. She specifically requested that all results be sent to her directly and that you not be contacted about follow-up appointments." I stared at the correspondence, seeing my mother's familiar tone of polite authority in every message. She had crafted each email to sound like a concerned parent managing her daughter's care, but the effect was complete information control. I had been cut off from my own medical reality. "There's more," Sophia continued, clicking through files. "Your mother requested copies of your university medical records, too. Apparently, she wanted to ensure consistency in messaging." The university records revealed another layer of manipulation. During my second year of law school, I had visited the campus clinic several times complaining of fatigue and swollen lymph nodes. The attending physician had referred me for follow-up with a specialist, but I had no memory of ever receiving that referral. According to these documents, Elena had contacted the clinic directly, explaining that our family physician would handle all follow-up care.
We had been working for hours when Sophia's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, and her expression darkened. "It's from my cousin, Miguel. He works nights as a security guard at St. Luke's." She showed me the message. "Strange activity in the medical records department tonight. Someone ordered emergency file destruction. Thought you should know." My blood ran cold. She's destroying evidence. Sophia was already grabbing her car keys. "Not if we can stop her." The drive to BGC felt surreal at 2 in the morning. Manila streets empty except for security guards and late-night delivery drivers. Sophia drove with the focused intensity she usually reserved for final exams, her hands gripping the steering wheel as she navigated traffic lights and empty intersections. "What exactly are we going to do when we get there?" I asked, the adrenaline beginning to wear off. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Document everything. Get witness statements. Create a record that can't be destroyed." She glanced at me. "Cam, your mother is committing multiple felonies. Medical fraud, destruction of evidence, potentially criminal neglect. This isn't just about family dynamics anymore." We arrived at the hospital to find Miguel waiting in the parking garage, looking nervous but determined. Sophia had called ahead to explain the situation, and he'd agreed to help despite the risk to his job. "They're still up there," he reported quietly. "Third floor, medical records department. Your mother and some guy in a suit, plus Mr. Tan from records management. They've been at it for over an hour." "What kind of destruction are we talking about?" Sophia asked. "Industrial paper shredders, but also a small incinerator for certain types of documents. They're being very thorough." Sophia looked at me grimly. "She's not just covering her tracks. She's obliterating them." We took the service elevator to the third floor, Miguel using his security access to get us into areas normally restricted after hours. The medical records department occupied half the floor, with rows of filing cabinets, computer terminals, and document processing equipment. Through the glass partition, we could see 3 figures moving systematically through stacks of papers. Elena stood beside an industrial shredder, feeding documents into its hungry mouth, while Mr. Tan, a thin man in his 50s, sorted files from several wheeled carts. The man in the suit supervised, occasionally pointing to specific documents or making notes on a legal pad. "Complete elimination of the paper trail," the man in the suit was saying. "Electronic records have already been purged from the main system, but these physical backups need special handling." Elena's voice carried clearly across the room. "How long has my daughter been asking questions?" "Dr. Cruz called me yesterday. She was requesting access to files that were supposedly transferred. I told her everything had been sent to the new facility as requested." "Good. And the university clinic records?" "Destroyed last week, as per your instructions, along with any correspondence between departments."
Sophia grabbed my arm, her eyes wide. This wasn't a recent panic response to my visit with Dr. Cruz. This was part of an ongoing systematic elimination of evidence that had been happening for weeks, possibly months. The inheritance hearing is in 6 months. By then, there can be no questions about Camilla's health status or our family's medical history. The trustees are very particular about genetic predispositions and long-term care costs. The inheritance hearing. I had completely forgotten about my grandfather's estate, still tied up in probate court nearly 3 years after his death. The will had specific provisions about family health disclosures, designed to ensure the inheritance wouldn't be consumed by medical expenses. Elena had been required to provide detailed health reports for all family members as part of the trustee review process. She had been hiding my cancer diagnosis to protect the family's inheritance rights. "What about the girl's recent tests?" the lawyer asked. "Dr. Cruz has been handled. Her cooperation has been secured through appropriate channels." Elena's voice carried a coldness I had never heard before, even during her worst moments of control. "Camilla will continue to receive stress management therapy until the inheritance
Finalized. After that, if her condition requires more aggressive intervention, we'll address it privately. After the inheritance was finalized. After my cancer had potentially progressed beyond treatability, the calculation was brutally simple. My life weighed against the family's financial interests, and Elena had chosen money. I felt something snap inside me, the final thread of daughterly loyalty and trust that had kept me compliant for 29 years. The room seemed to tilt as rage and betrayal flooded through me, but this time it wasn't the weakness of illness. This was the clarity of pure, justified fury. Sophia squeezed my hand as Miguel reappeared, his face grim. "I got it all on my phone," he whispered, holding up his device. "Audio recording of the entire conversation. They never noticed me." We had evidence now. Not just Dr. Cruz's backup files, but proof of active, ongoing criminal activity. Elena had revealed her motivations, her methods, and her complete disregard for my life in her own words. "What now?" Miguel asked. I stood up slowly, my legs steadier than they had been in months. The exhaustion was still there, but it was overshadowed by something I hadn't felt in years. Absolute certainty about what needed to happen next. "Now we build a case," I said, my voice carrying Sophia's familiar tone of courtroom determination, "and we destroy her in court before she can destroy any more evidence." Finding my father required more detective work than I'd expected. Miguel Reyes had effectively vanished from Manila's social circles after his separation from Elena 5 years ago, leaving behind only forwarding addresses and disconnected phone numbers. Sophia finally tracked him down through his old business partner, who mentioned he'd been running a small consulting firm from a modest office in Pasig City. The Miguel Reyes I found bore little resemblance to the polished businessman who used to accompany Elena to charity galas. His hair had gone completely gray, and he'd traded his custom suits for simple polo shirts and khakis. His office occupied the second floor of a converted residential building, with hand-painted signage and a receptionist who doubled as his bookkeeper. "Camila!" He rose from behind his desk as Sophia and I entered, his face cycling through surprise, joy, and immediate concern. "You look—" He stopped himself, but I could see him taking in my gaunt appearance, the way my clothes hung loose, the dark circles under my eyes. "I look sick," I finished for him, "because I am sick, and I need to know what you remember about my medical care before you leave." His expression shifted to something I recognized as the same wariness Sophia had shown when questioning Elena's version of events. "Sit down, both of you. This sounds like a conversation that requires coffee and complete honesty." While he prepared coffee on a small burner in the corner of his office, I laid out everything we'd discovered. Dr. Cruz's records, the destroyed files, the recorded conversation from the hospital. He listened in silence, his face growing darker with each revelation. "Your mother always controlled information," he said, setting steaming mugs in front of us.
But I never imagined she would control something like this, medical information about her own daughter. What do you remember when I first started getting sick? Were you still living with us then? He rubbed his temples, thinking. The timeline fits. You started complaining about fatigue during your second year of law school, right around the time Elena and I were having our worst fights. She kept insisting you were just stressed about academics and social pressures. But you disagreed? I wanted you to see a proper physician. Elena said she was handling it, that she'd already consulted with specialists who recommended therapy and lifestyle changes. His voice grew bitter. I trusted her. God help me, I trusted her to put your health first. Sophia leaned forward. What were you and Elena fighting about? You said they were your worst fights. He hesitated, glancing between us. Money, specifically your grandfather's inheritance and Elena's obsession with maintaining our family's social standing. She was spending enormous amounts on appearances while making strategic financial decisions I couldn't support. The inheritance again. Every thread seemed to lead back to the family money that Elena was so desperate to protect. Tell us about the inheritance. What would happen if the trustees knew about my diagnosis? The estate is structured to minimize risk to the family's long-term wealth. Your grandfather was terrified that future generations might face catastrophic medical expenses that would consume everything he'd built. The trust includes specific provisions about genetic health risks and ongoing medical costs. Meaning beneficiaries with serious hereditary conditions or expensive chronic illnesses receive their inheritance through restricted medical trusts instead of direct cash disbursement. The money can only be used for health care, not invested or passed to future generations. Sophia whistled low. So if Elena disclosed Camilla's cancer diagnosis, the family would still inherit, but it would be locked up in medical accounts? Exactly. And Elena has always seen that inheritance as her ticket to permanent Social Security. She grew up poor, married into our family for stability, and views that money as non-negotiable. The picture was becoming clearer and more horrifying. Elena hadn't hidden my diagnosis out of maternal protection or denial. She'd made a calculated decision to risk my life to preserve her vision of our family's financial future. There's something else, Miguel continued, his voice heavy with guilt. During our separation proceedings, Elena accused me of having an affair. She claimed I was emotionally unstable and unfit to be involved in family medical decisions. She got a court order granting her sole authority over your healthcare as an adult dependent. I was never an adult dependent, I protested. I was in law school, living independently. You were still on our family health insurance and occasionally stayed at the family home during academic breaks. Elena's lawyers argued that you were financially dependent and that my erratic behavior during the divorce made me an unsuitable healthcare proxy. Sophia's law student training kicked in immediately. She manipulated the family court system to isolate you from your daughter's medical care. Miguel, this wasn't just about controlling Camilla. She systematically removed every adult who might advocate for proper health care. Miguel nodded miserably. I should have fought harder, but Elena threatened to make the divorce proceedings even more public, to drag our family name through scandal that would affect your future career prospects. She said if I backed down and left quietly, she'd ensure your law school education was protected. So you left. I left, and I trusted Elena to take care of you properly. He looked at me with eyes full of regret. Camilla, I failed you completely. I chose the path of least resistance when I should have been protecting you from her manipulation. The room fell silent as we absorbed the full scope of Elena's planning. She had systematically eliminated my medical autonomy, isolated potential advocates, and positioned herself as the sole authority over my healthcare, all to protect money that, ultimately, would benefit her more than anyone else. Miguel, Sophia said carefully, would you be willing to testify about what you just told us? About Elena's control tactics and the inheritance provisions? In court? We're building a case for medical fraud and potentially criminal neglect. Your testimony about the family court proceedings and Elena's motivations would be crucial. Miguel looked at me for a long moment. Will testifying help you get the medical care you need? It might save my life, I said simply. He stood up and walked to the window overlooking the modest street below, so different from the luxury developments where Elena maintained her social standing. When he turned back to us, his expression held a resolve I hadn't seen since childhood. Then yes, I'll testify. I'll tell them everything I know about Elena's manipulation and control. And Camilla, I want to help you fight this properly. No more quiet surrender. For the first time since discovering the truth, I felt like I had a real ally within my own family. Not just Sophia's fierce friendship, but a parent who was choosing my well-being over family politics and social appearances. There's something else, Miguel added, returning to his desk and pulling out a small address book. During our marriage, Elena kept detailed records of every family interaction, every financial decision, every social obligation. She documented everything to maintain control over our public image. Where would those records be now? In her home office, most likely. She has files on everyone we've ever dealt with, including medical professionals, lawyers, and financial advisors. If she's been covering up your diagnosis for 2 years, there will be documentation of that cover-up. Sophia's eyes lit up with the possibility. Documentation that might still exist because she was keeping it for her own protection rather than destroying it. Exactly. Elena never throws away anything that might give her leverage later. Her paranoia about maintaining control might be the very thing that provides evidence against her. As we prepared to leave Miguel's office, he pulled me aside for a private moment. Camilla, I know I don't deserve forgiveness for abandoning you when you needed protection, but I want you to know that fighting Elena's control is the bravest thing you could do. Don't let her convince you that family loyalty requires accepting her version of reality. I won't, I promised. And for the first time in years, I meant it completely. Dr. Isabel Cruz agreed to meet us at a small cafe in Bonifacio High Street rather than her office, explaining that our conversation required privacy she couldn't guarantee at the hospital. She arrived looking tired and nervous, clutching a leather briefcase that she kept close to her side throughout our meeting. Before we talk, she said, glancing around the cafe to ensure we weren't being overheard, I need you to understand that what I'm about to tell you could end my career, but what your mother has done could end your life, and that matters more than my professional reputation. Sophia had insisted on coming to take detailed notes, understanding that Dr. Cruz's testimony would be crucial to any legal case we might build. I watched the doctor carefully, seeing the conflict between her medical ethics and her fear of Elena's retaliation. Tell me about the first time you met my mother, I said gently. Dr. Cruz opened her briefcase and pulled out a slim folder containing photocopied documents. It was approximately 18 months ago. You had been referred to me by your family physician for evaluation of persistent fatigue and swollen lymph nodes. Your mother accompanied you to that first appointment. I don't remember that appointment. I'm not surprised. You were given a mild sedative beforehand, supposedly to help with anxiety about medical procedures. Your mother explained that you had a phobia of doctors and medical environments. She paused. At the time, it seemed like a reasonable accommodation for a nervous patient. The sedative explained why I had no memory of being at the hospital during the crucial diagnostic period. Elena had chemically ensured my compliance while gathering information she could control. What did the tests reveal? Stage 2 Hodgkin lymphoma, highly treatable with standard chemotherapy protocols. The 5-year survival rate for patients your age with this diagnosis is over 95% when caught at this stage. The number hit me like a physical blow. 95% survival rate? With proper treatment 18 months ago, I would have had an excellent prognosis. Now, after months of disease progression, my odds were significantly worse. What happened after you made the diagnosis? Dr. Cruz opened her briefcase and showed me copies of medical reports, consultation notes, and treatment recommendations. I scheduled a follow-up appointment to discuss treatment options and referred you to an oncologist colleague for a second opinion. I also provided your mother with detailed information about lymphoma, including treatment protocols and expected outcomes. But I never came to the follow-up appointment. No. Your mother called my office the next day to cancel. She explained that the family was seeking care at a specialized facility and would no longer need my services. She requested that all medical records be transferred to their new provider. Sophia looked up from her notes. What facility? That's where things become complicated, Dr. Cruz admitted. The facility she named doesn't actually specialize in lymphoma treatment. It's primarily a mental health and wellness center that focuses on stress management and alternative therapies. I felt the familiar rage building again, but I forced myself to stay focused. Tell me about the time you questioned this decision. I tried to. I called your mother several times to express concern about the delay in starting treatment. Hodgkin lymphoma is extremely responsive to early intervention, but timing is critical. Each month of delay reduces the effectiveness of treatment. What was her response? Dr. Cruz looked uncomfortable. She said the family had consulted with specialists who recommended a more holistic approach. She claimed you were emotionally fragile and that aggressive medical treatment might cause psychological damage that would be worse than the disease itself. And you believed that? I wanted to believe it wasn't my place to question family medical decisions, she said honestly, but professionally, I knew it was wrong. Hodgkin lymphoma doesn't respond to alternative therapy or stress management. It requires medical intervention. Sophia leaned forward. Dr. Cruz, what happened next? You must have tried to follow up. I did. Over the course of several months, I attempted to contact you directly. Every time, your mother intercepted the communication and reiterated that the family was handling your care privately. She eventually threatened to file a harassment complaint if I continued trying to reach you. The pattern was consistent with everything we'd already discovered. Elena had systematically isolated me from medical professionals while maintaining the appearance of responsible healthcare management. Then what changed? Why did you keep backup records?
Dr. Cruz was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee cup. About 6 months after your diagnosis, I received a call from another physician asking for consultation on a similar case. A young woman whose mother was controlling her medical information and blocking access to appropriate care. That case involved domestic abuse disguised as medical advocacy. You realized what Elena was doing. I began to suspect that your situation might be similar. Medical control is a form of abuse that's often overlooked because it appears to be protective parental behavior. But controlling someone's access to their own health information, especially life-threatening health information, is a form of violence. She opened the folder and spread several documents across the small cafe cable. I started keeping personal copies of your case files, documenting every interaction with your mother, every attempt she made to control information flow. I told myself I was protecting my professional reputation, but honestly, I was protecting evidence. Sophia photographed each document with her phone while Dr. Cruz explained their significance. Original lab reports, imaging studies, pathology results, and treatment recommendations. Physical proof of my diagnosis and Elena's systematic rejection of medical care. Dr. Cruz, I said, I need to ask you something directly. Based on your experience, was my mother's behavior consistent with someone who was genuinely trying to protect me or someone who had other motivations? She met my eyes steadily. In my professional opinion, your mother's actions were not consistent with a parent prioritizing their child's health. She showed no interest in understanding your diagnosis, no emotional response to the severity of your condition, and no urgency about beginning treatment. Her primary concern appeared to be controlling information rather than securing appropriate medical care. Can you prove that? Dr. Cruz pulled out a small digital recorder from her briefcase. During one of our phone conversations, your mother made statements that I found so concerning that I started recording our calls. She explicitly stated that she needed to manage your medical information to protect family interests that were more important than immediate treatment. My hands shook as she played a brief excerpt of Elena's voice explaining why delaying my cancer treatment was necessary to preserve our family's, quote,
long-term stability and reputation. Hearing her discuss my life as a calculated risk in her own words was more devastating than any of the documentary evidence. Sophia looked up from her notes with grim satisfaction. Dr. Cruz, would you be willing to testify about what you've told us today? In court? Under oath? Yes, she said without hesitation. What Elena Reyes has done is not just medical malpractice, it's criminal endangerment of her own daughter. I became a doctor to save lives, not to be complicit in threatening them. As we prepared to leave, Dr. Cruz handed me a business card with her personal contact information. Camila, I want you to know that your case has changed how I practice medicine. I now ask patients directly about who controls their medical information and whether they're receiving that information firsthand. No family member, regardless of their stated intentions, should have complete authority over another adult's health decisions. Thank you, I said, meaning it completely, for keeping the records, for speaking out, and for believing that my life was worth protecting. Your life is worth protecting, she replied firmly, and now you have the evidence to prove that Elena knew that, but chose to endanger you anyway. The law library at the University of the Philippines became our headquarters over the next 3 weeks, as Sophia and I prepared for what we both knew would be the legal battle of our lives. She had withdrawn from her other coursework to focus entirely on building our case, while I threw myself into research with the intensity of someone fighting for their life because that's exactly what I was doing. Medical fraud, criminal endangerment, destruction of evidence, and potentially attempted murder, Sophia muttered, surrounded by legal textbooks and case files. Your mother didn't just commit one crime, Cam, she committed an entire criminal enterprise. We had reached out to other law students and professors for advice, carefully omitting identifying details while seeking guidance on prosecution strategies for medical manipulation cases. The legal precedents were limited but promising. Filipino courts had been increasingly willing to prosecute cases involving family medical control, particularly when financial motivations could be demonstrated. Miguel visited daily, bringing coffee and serving as our unofficial paralegal. His business background proved invaluable for understanding the financial documentation we'd need to prove Elena's inheritance-based motivations. He also provided crucial insight into Elena's personality and methods. He keeps records of everything, he reminded us during one of our strategy sessions. Every doctor she's contacted, every form she signed, every conversation about your healthcare. She documents control because control is how she maintains power. But she's also been destroying evidence, I pointed out. Hospital evidence, yes, but not personal evidence. Elena never destroys anything that might be useful for her own protection later. She's paranoid about being betrayed, so she keeps insurance against everyone she deals with.
This gave us an idea that bordered on investigative journalism. If Elena kept detailed records of her medical manipulation, those records would likely be stored in her home office, which I still had access to as her daughter. The ethical implications were complicated, but Sophia argued that Elena had forfeited any reasonable expectation of privacy through her criminal behavior. It's your medical information she's been controlling, Sophia reasoned. You have a right to access documentation about your own healthcare, regardless of who's been keeping that documentation. We planned carefully. Elena attended a weekly charity board meeting every Thursday afternoon at the Ayala Museum, followed by lunch with her society friends. The meetings ran long, giving us a predictable 3-hour window for searching her home office. The following Thursday, I used my key to enter the Makati penthouse while Sophia kept watch from the lobby. Elena's office occupied a corner of the apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the business district. Her desk was organized with military precision, every document filed according to her personal system. I found the medical files in her locked desk drawer, secured behind Elena's typical password system based on important family dates. Inside were comprehensive records of her manipulation campaign, organized chronologically and annotated with her handwritten notes. The documentation was more damning than anything we had imagined. Elena had kept copies of every forged document, every altered medical report, every communication with healthcare providers. She had maintained detailed logs of my physical condition, noting the progression of my symptoms while simultaneously blocking my access to treatment. Most shocking were her personal notes, written in her careful handwriting, calculating the costs and benefits of different approaches to my illness. She had researched the inheritance implications of various medical scenarios and calculated exactly how much money the family would lose if my diagnosis became part of the official record. One note, dated just 3 weeks earlier, made my blood run cold. Camila's condition was stable enough to delay treatment until inheritance was finalized. Physical deterioration manageable through continued stress diagnosis. Timeline critical. Trustees review scheduled for December. She had been monitoring my physical decline and timing her deception around the probate court schedule. My life had become a line item in her financial planning. I photographed everything with trembling hands, knowing that each image was evidence of Elena's complete betrayal of maternal responsibility. These weren't the actions of a protective mother making difficult decisions under stress. These were the calculated choices of someone who valued money more than her daughter's life. Sophia helped me organize the evidence when I returned to the law library, both of us working in shocked silence as the full scope of Elena's planning became clear. "She's been building a case for her own protection," Sophia finally said. "Look at these notes about Dr. Cruz. She documented every interaction, every pressure point she used to control the situation. She expected to need this evidence eventually." "Evidence for what?" "For defending herself when you died." Sophia's voice was barely above a whisper. "Cam, I think she was preparing to claim that she made reasonable medical decisions based on professional advice. All of this documentation would support a defense of good faith medical management if you hadn't survived long enough to expose her." The implication hit me like a physical blow. Elena hadn't just been gambling with my life. She had been preparing to justify my death as an unfortunate outcome of responsible healthcare decisions. She would have maintained her inheritance, her social standing, and her reputation while positioning herself as a grieving mother who had done everything possible to save her daughter. That evening, I called Miguel to share what we'd discovered. His reaction was immediate and volcanic. "That's not medical management," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "That's premeditated murder disguised as healthcare. She was willing to let you die to protect money that doesn't even belong to her." "Miguel, I need to ask you something. Are you prepared to see this through to the end? Elena is going to fight back with everything she has. She'll try to destroy both of us if we threaten her control." "Camila, your mother destroyed our family years ago through manipulation and control. I won't let her destroy you too. Whatever legal battle we're facing, I'm prepared to fight it." Sophia looked up from her legal research. "We're not just facing a legal battle. We're dismantling a criminal conspiracy that's been operating for years. Elena hasn't just committed crimes against Camila. She's corrupted medical professionals, destroyed evidence, and potentially endangered other patients through her manipulation of healthcare systems." "What do you mean?" "Dr. Cruz mentioned that other physicians had contacted her about similar cases. Elena's methods aren't unique to your situation. She may have advised other families on how to control medical information for financial benefit." The possibility that Elena's medical manipulation extended beyond our family added another dimension to our case. We weren't just fighting for my life. We were potentially exposing a pattern of medical fraud that could affect other victims.
"So what's our next step?" Miguel asked. Sophia stacked the evidence files on the law library table, her expression determined. "We file criminal charges, all of them, and we request an emergency hearing to remove Elena from any authority over Camila's healthcare before she can cause any more damage. And then? Then we go to court and we destroy her," I said, feeling stronger than I had in months, with her own evidence. The Manila Regional Trial Court buzzed with anticipation as photographers and society reporters filled the public gallery. News of the Reyes family legal battle had spread through Manila's social circles like wildfire, drawing curious onlookers eager to witness the downfall of one of the city's most prominent families. Elena entered the courtroom like she was attending another charity gala, dressed in an elegant navy suit with her signature pearl necklace. She nodded graciously to acquaintances in the gallery, maintaining the composed smile that had served her so well in social situations. Only I could see the slight tremor in her hands as she took her seat at the defendant's table. Judge Mariano Villanueva commanded immediate respect as he entered, his reputation for intolerance of corruption and manipulation preceding him. Sophia had specifically requested him for our case, knowing his track record of harsh sentences for family financial crimes. "This court will hear the case of Reyes versus Reyes," Judge Villanueva announced, his voice carrying clearly through the packed courtroom. "The plaintiff alleges criminal medical fraud, destruction of evidence, and endangerment of life by the defendant, her own mother." Elena's lawyer, a polished man in an expensive suit, stood to deliver his opening statement. "Your Honor, this case represents a tragic misunderstanding between a devoted mother and her emotionally unstable daughter. Elena Reyes made difficult medical decisions in consultation with healthcare professionals, always with her daughter's best interests at heart." Sophia rose to respond, her voice steady and confident despite the pressure of arguing her first major case. "Your Honor, the evidence will show that Elena Reyes systematically destroyed medical records, forged documents, and denied her daughter life-saving cancer treatment to protect a family inheritance. This wasn't medical decision-making, this was calculated as attempted murder." The gallery stirred at Sophia's accusation, and I saw Elena's composure crack slightly. She whispered urgently to her lawyer, who nodded and made notes on his legal pad. Elena took the witness stand with practiced grace, her testimony delivered in the same warm, authoritative tone she used for charity fundraising speeches. "I have always prioritized Camila's well-being above all else," she stated. "When she began experiencing health problems, I consulted with multiple specialists who recommended stress management and emotional support rather than invasive medical procedures." "What specialists?" Sophia asked during cross-examination. "Dr. Martinez, our family therapist, and several others whose names I don't recall precisely. Dr. Martinez specializes in anxiety disorders, not oncology, correct?" Elena hesitated. "He provided holistic care recommendations." Sophia moved closer to the witness stand. "Mrs. Reyes, did any cancer specialist ever recommend avoiding cancer treatment in favor of stress management?" Elena's lawyer objected, but Judge Villanueva overruled him. "Answer the question, Mrs. Reyes." "No," Elena admitted quietly. Miguel's testimony proved devastating to Elena's defense. Speaking in the same calm, measured tone he used for business presentations, he methodically described Elena's pattern of control and manipulation. "Elena obtained legal authority over Camila's medical decisions by claiming I was unfit during our divorce. She used family court proceedings to isolate our daughter from anyone who might advocate for proper health care." "What was Elena's primary concern during this time?" Sophia asked. "Maintaining control over our family's financial future, specifically the inheritance from Camila's grandfather that would be affected by any major medical expenses or genetic health risks." Elena's lawyer attempted to portray Miguel as a bitter ex-husband seeking revenge, but his composed demeanor and detailed documentation made his testimony credible and damaging. The day's most dramatic moment came when Sophia introduced Elena's own handwritten notes as evidence. The courtroom fell silent as she read aloud Elena's calculations about delaying treatment until the inheritance was finalized. "Your Honor," Sophia announced, "I'm reading from notes found in the defendant's personal files written in her own handwriting. Camila's condition is stable enough to delay treatment until inheritance is finalized. Timeline critical. Trustees' review scheduled for December."
Elena's face went pale as gasps echoed through the gallery. Her carefully constructed image of the devoted mother crumbled in real time as her own words condemned her. Judge Villanueva's expression darkened as he examined the evidence. The preliminary hearing had become a public exposure of Elena's calculated betrayal, witnessed by the same social elite who had celebrated her philanthropic work just months earlier. The second day of proceedings began with Dr. Isabel Cruz taking the witness stand, her medical credentials lending weight to her testimony about Elena's systematic interference in my healthcare. She spoke with clinical precision about my diagnosis, the recommended treatment protocols, and Elena's deliberate obstruction of medical care. "In my professional opinion," Dr. Cruz testified,
The defendant's actions constituted medical endangerment of the highest order. She was fully informed about her daughter's cancer diagnosis and the urgent need for treatment, yet she chose to prevent that treatment from occurring. Elena's lawyer attempted to discredit Dr. Cruz by questioning her decision to keep backup medical records, suggesting she had violated patient confidentiality protocols. But Sophia skillfully redirected the focus to Elena's systematic destruction of evidence. Dr. Cruz, when you learned that official medical records were being destroyed, what was your professional obligation? To preserve any evidence that might be necessary to protect the patient's life and well-being, Dr. Cruz replied firmly. Sophia walked to the evidence table and picked up a small thumb drive, holding it up for the court to see. Your Honor, Dr. Cruz has provided this court with backup copies of medical records that the defendant believed had been completely destroyed. Elena's composure finally shattered. She stood abruptly at the defendant's table, her face flushed with anger and panic. Those records were destroyed legally. I had authority. Mrs. Reyes, please remain seated, Judge Villanueva commanded sternly. Sophia connected the thumb drive to the courtroom's digital display system, and my original medical records appeared on screens visible throughout the room. The pathology reports, imaging studies, and treatment recommendations created an undeniable timeline of Elena's deception. These records show that Camila Reyes was diagnosed with stage 2 Hodgkin lymphoma 18 months ago. The recommended treatment protocol would have provided a 95% 5-year survival rate. The defendant prevented this treatment from being administered. But the most damaging evidence was still to come. Dr. Cruz had not only preserved my medical records, but also her recorded phone conversations with Elena. Sophia played the audio for the court, Elena's voice clearly stating her need to manage Camilla's medical information to protect family interests more important than immediate treatment. The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs as Elena's own words played through the sound system. Her lawyer frantically objected, but the recordings were properly authenticated and legally obtained. Mr. Tan, the medical records clerk, was called as a witness and admitted under oath to destroying physical medical records at Elena's direction. His testimony revealed the scope of the cover-up, including the incineration of documents and the purging of electronic databases. Mrs. Reyes paid me to ensure certain records would never be recoverable. She said it was to protect her daughter's privacy, but I knew it wasn't normal procedure. How much did she pay you? Sophia asked. 50,000 pesos initially, then another 100,000 when she needed the university clinic records destroyed. The admission of bribery added another criminal charge to Elena's growing legal troubles. Sophia introduced bank records showing the payments, further establishing Elena's premeditation and systematic approach to evidence destruction. Judge Villanueva examined each piece of evidence methodically, his expression growing more severe with each revelation. When Sophia played the recording of Elena calculating the financial benefits of hiding my diagnosis, he removed his glasses and stared directly at the defendant. Mrs. Reyes, are you prepared to explain to this court how delaying your daughter's cancer treatment served her medical interests rather than your financial interests? Elena's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear, but she stood to address the court directly. Your Honor, I was protecting my family from a scandal that would have destroyed our reputation and our ability to contribute to society through our charitable work. You are protecting money, Judge Villanueva replied flatly, at the cost of your daughter's life. The thumb drive revelation had transformed our case from a family dispute into clear evidence of criminal behavior. Elena's own documentation, preserved by her paranoid need to control information, had become the instrument of her destruction.
As the court recessed, I watched Elena leave the courtroom, surrounded by lawyers and family members who had previously supported her. For the first time in my life, she looked small and powerless, her carefully constructed authority crumbling under the weight of her own evidence. Judge Villanueva's decision came swiftly, delivered with the gravity befitting a case that had exposed systematic criminal behavior disguised as family medical care. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity, with standing room only as Manila's social elite gathered to witness Elena's final judgment. This court finds the defendant, Elena Reyes, guilty of medical fraud, criminal endangerment, destruction of evidence, and conspiracy to commit bodily harm, Judge Villanueva announced, his voice echoing through the silent courtroom. The evidence presented demonstrates a calculated and sustained effort to deny life-saving medical treatment to her own daughter for financial gain. Elena stood rigidly at the defendant's table as the judge continued, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. The woman who had controlled every aspect of our family's public image for decades was being publicly stripped of power and authority. The court hereby removes Elena Reyes from all authority over her daughter's medical care and financial affairs. Camila Reyes is granted full control over her medical decisions and inheritance rights, effective immediately. Sophia squeezed my hand as the magnitude of the victory sank in. Not only had we exposed Elena's crimes, but the court had restored my legal autonomy and financial independence. The inheritance that Elena had been so desperate to protect would now fund my medical treatment without her interference. But Elena wasn't finished. As Judge Villanueva announced her sentence, 5 years in prison, plus restitution for medical expenses, she erupted in the kind of rage I had never seen from her before. "She's destroying our family!" Elena screamed, pointing at me accusingly. "Everything I did was to protect our reputation, our legacy. She's ungrateful, unstable, and she's betraying everything our family stands for." "Mrs. Reyes," Judge Villanueva warned, but Elena continued her outburst. "I saved her from the stigma of being a cancer patient. I protected her from the social consequences of being seen as damaged goods. And this is how she repays me? By destroying our family name in public?" Her words revealed everything about her true motivations. Even in defeat, Elena couldn't acknowledge that my life had value beyond our family's social standing. In her mind, she had been protecting me from the inconvenience of being sick rather than committing crimes against my health and autonomy. The gallery watched in stunned silence as Elena was led away by court officers, still protesting her innocence in my ingratitude. Several family members and social acquaintances quietly filed out of the courtroom, distancing themselves from the scandal that would dominate Manila's society news for months. Miguel approached the plaintiff's table with tears in his eyes. "Camila, I'm so proud of you for fighting back. Your mother's control ended today, permanently." Sophia gathered our legal documents with the satisfaction of a law student who had just won her first major case. "The criminal charges are resolved, but we still need to pursue civil damages for medical malpractice and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Elena's crimes have financial consequences beyond the criminal penalties." As we left the courthouse, I was surrounded by reporters asking for statements about my legal victory and my medical condition. For the first time in my life, I spoke publicly about our family's private affairs without Elena's permission or control. My mother hid my cancer diagnosis to protect money that she valued more than my life, I told the gathering crowd. Today's verdict proves that medical control is a form of abuse and that no family member has the right to make life or death decisions for another adult without their knowledge or consent. The questions continued, but I felt strong enough to answer them honestly. Elena's power over me had been legally and publicly terminated. Her attempts to control my medical information, my financial future, and my public voice had failed completely. That evening, Miguel, Sophia, and I sat in my apartment, the same space where I had spent months wondering why I was getting sicker while Elena insisted everything was fine. The contrast between my previous helplessness and my current empowerment was profound. "What happens next?" Miguel asked. "I start treatment," I said, simply. "Real treatment with real doctors who will communicate directly with me about my own health. And I use Elena's financial restitution to fund advocacy for other patients who might be facing similar medical control and manipulation." Sophia looked up from her phone where she'd been reading news coverage of our case. "Cam,
you're getting messages from other families who think they might be dealing with similar situations. Your case is exposing a problem that goes beyond your mother's crimes. The possibility that our legal battle could help other victims of medical manipulation gave Elena's betrayal a different kind of meaning. Her systematic destruction of my healthcare ultimately created evidence and legal precedents that could protect other patients from similar abuse.
As I prepared for bed that night, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and saw something I hadn't seen in months. Hope. Elena's control over my medical information had ended permanently. Her authority over my financial future had been transferred to me, and her power to define our family's public narrative had been shattered by her own criminal behavior. Tomorrow, I will begin chemotherapy. Not because Elena had finally decided to allow it, but because I had fought for and won the right to save my own life. 6 months later, I stood before a packed auditorium at the Philippine General Hospital, my voice steady as I addressed the monthly meeting of the Manila Cancer Support Network. The chemotherapy had been successful, and my oncologist was cautiously optimistic about my long-term prognosis. More importantly, I was finally receiving honest medical information about my own body. Medical manipulation is a form of family abuse that often goes unrecognized, I told the audience of patients, caregivers, and healthcare professionals. When someone controls your access to health information about your own body, they are committing a form of violence, regardless of their stated motivations. The support group had grown exponentially since our court case made national news. Patients from across the Philippines had reached out, sharing stories of family members who had hidden diagnoses, altered treatment plans, or prevented access to medical care for financial, social, or religious reasons. Sophia, now completing her law degree with a specialization in medical rights advocacy, sat in the front row taking notes for the legal clinic we were establishing together. Miguel occupied the seat beside her, his presence a steady reminder that family members could choose to support rather than control. The Reyes Medical Advocacy Foundation, I announced, will provide legal support, medical advocacy, and financial assistance to patients whose families are interfering with their healthcare decisions. No one should have to choose between family relationships and life-saving medical treatment. The foundation was primarily funded by Elena's court-ordered restitution and my grandfather's inheritance, money that had nearly cost me my life, but now would be used to protect other patients from similar betrayal. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who knew our story. Dr. Isabel Cruz had volunteered as our medical advisor, using her experience with family medical manipulation to train other physicians in recognizing and addressing healthcare control issues. Her backup medical records not only saved my life, but created a template for protecting other patients' medical information from family interference. Medical manipulation is a form of family abuse that often goes unrecognized, I told the audience of patients, caregivers, and healthcare professionals. When someone controls your access to health information about your own body, they are committing a form of violence, regardless of their stated motivations. The support group had grown exponentially since our court case made national news. Patients from across the Philippines had reached out, sharing stories of family members who had hidden diagnoses, altered treatment plans, or prevented access to medical care for financial, social, or religious reasons. Sophia, now completing her law degree with a specialization in medical rights advocacy, sat in the front row taking notes for the legal clinic we were establishing together. Miguel occupied the seat beside her, his presence a steady reminder that family members could choose to support rather than control. The Reyes Medical Advocacy Foundation, I announced, will provide legal support, medical advocacy, and financial assistance to patients whose families are interfering with their healthcare decisions. No one should have to choose between family relationships and life-saving medical treatment. The foundation was funded primarily by Elena's court-ordered restitution and my grandfather's inheritance, money that had nearly cost me my life, but now would be used to protect other patients from similar betrayal. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who knew our story. Dr. Isabel Cruz had volunteered as our medical advisor, using her experience with family medical manipulation to train other physicians in recognizing and addressing healthcare control issues.
Her backup medical records not only saved my life, but created a template for protecting other patients' medical information from family interference. Recovery isn't just about treating the disease, I continued, looking out at faces that reflected my own journey from victim to survivor to advocate. It's about reclaiming the right to make informed decisions about your own body, your own life, and your own future. After the meeting, I walked through the hospital corridors where Elena had once orchestrated my medical isolation. Now these same hallways buzzed with conversations about patient rights, medical autonomy, and family advocacy rather than family control. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. 3 new cases this week, including one that sounds exactly like what Elena did to you. This work matters. I smiled, running my fingers along the small scar where my chemotherapy port had been removed the month before. The mark was barely visible, but it served as a permanent reminder that my body belonged to me, not to anyone else's vision of family reputation or financial security. Elena remained in prison, still maintaining her innocence and claiming she had been protecting rather than endangering me. Her letters, which I no longer read, reportedly continued to express bewilderment at my betrayal of family loyalty. But standing in that hospital, surrounded by patients who were fighting for their lives with full knowledge of their conditions and complete control over their treatment decisions, I understood that loyalty to family could never require surrendering the right to live. My scars had become proof of survival rather than shame, and Elena's attempt to control my medical destiny had ultimately created a legacy of patient advocacy that would outlast both of us. The truth, as it turned out, was stronger than secrecy, and life was always worth fighting for.